This morning we are vertical jigging for crappie. I already got my buoys out there. We used some down and side imaging to find a brush pile, and now we're using an ice flasher to vertical jig those fish. Let's not waste any time. Let's get out there and see what we can find. Stay tuned. And that's a pretty good one this morning. Got a bit of ripple and low light. Those two things are gonna work for us in helping us catch and find these crappie. We have probably about 6 inches to a foot of clarity. Those are all excellent things to help keep those fish biting, especially when I'm right over top of those fish. When I'm vertical jigging, I am all up in their business, and that kind of helps keep me more concealed. There's another one, folks. It's been a pretty consistent bite. What I'm doing with my ice flasher and my down and side imaging is I am always observing what is going on the screen. I'm trying to find the spot on the spot with my electronics. Sometimes they like to hang out a bit further away from the brush pile. Sometimes they're out above the stump, and sometimes they're in the treetops. More often than not, they're in the thickest part. Those fish are just suspending amongst those limbs, and I'm dropping my jig to those fish. I'm going in after them and just trying to get that jig right in front of them for as long as possible. I never take my jig out of the water. It's constantly soaking until I feel that thump. Only when I feel that thump does that jig come out of the water. There's a pretty decent fish right there. I can't tell if this sun is going to activate those fish or hurt the bite. With the sun coming up, we don't have as much of a breeze coming across the lake, which will make those fish more aware of my presence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try fan casting this and see if we can catch a few that way, and maybe just lay off this pile and not vertical jig for a sec. I believe that sometimes backing off that brush pile and fan casting it sometimes catches a few more fish. I feel like it makes those fish feel a little less pressured and more willing to bite. What it also does is it gives those fish kind of a different visual presentation. You're working that lure laterally rather than vertically when you're fan casting those brush piles. Just try to get as close to that cover as possible, and you can still pick off a few more fish fan casting those piles. Another great thing about fan casting and just backing off those piles is when you're doing that, at the same time you can look at your electronics and see if those fish are just holding a little differently to that brush pile. Like I said, a lot of times they're deep in that cover. That's usually the case, but sometimes they're several feet, several yards off that brush pile, and by fan casting you're meandering and working outside the brush pile, and sometimes you can pick up a few of those fish or a school off of the brush pile. So it allows you to see how those fish relate differently to that cover. Ultimately, those slick conditions did shut down the bite. Vertical jigging and fan casting were not as effective as when I had a little bit of ripple and a little bit of low light. The sun was coming up, the conditions got slick, and that bite got a lot tougher when those conditions settled into the area. At the end of the day, I had to make a location change and a lure change that kind of went against the crappie fishing rules of dirty water. That water was probably no clearer than 6 inches. My lures disappeared immediately when they were dropped in the water. So check it out. The biggest one came on something I did not expect. Oh, guys, finally. Look at that sucker. Look at what I used. Bobby Garland near transparent minnow. Got the job done. There he is. That is a day ender. If that's my last fish, that's what I was looking for. That's what I couldn't get to bite. Get him back. Tank. What I caught him on was a regular jig head, no color, and a near transparent 1 1/4 inch Bobby Garland Itty bit SwimR, next to nothing. A lure that was so small and transparent in profile that I don't even know if those fish could see that lure when they hit it. They may have been working entirely off of movement and the vibrations of that jig in the water. I do not think that those fish could see that jig 4 feet down in that dirty of water. I tried a variety of loud color combinations and sizes, and it just wasn't getting the job done. So I went totally the opposite of what I normally do and just dropped something very, very natural, something not even visible to those fish. This just goes to show how well versed those fish are in their environment. I think it's easy to undersell those fish intelligence. Those fish are very familiar with that dirty water. That water is always dirty in that lake. They know how to hunt in that dirty water. So just be versatile, change things up, and maybe try things that sometimes go against the grain, because sometimes that is the ticket. I really believe that I caught my largest fish of the day because I made that switch that wasn't necessarily the intuitive change to make. Y'all take care. I'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in. Get out there, catch some fish. Peace.